Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the show. I have a guest on that I've probably had on more than any of my other guests. So I think we've done like two or three shows together. So I would recommend checking them out. And they're somewhat even tied to kind of the topic we're going to be covering today. So my friend and a good guest is here today, Jator Pierre. Welcome back to the show.
As long as I'm the good guest and I've had more shows than anyone else, I feel a sense of satisfaction in my matter in the world. Thank you, Eugene.
No,
Thanks for
no worries.
having me back.
That's what I try to do. That's what I try to do here at the Eugene Trufkin Radio. Make everyone feel great about themselves.
Perfect.
Every time, 10% of the
Thank
time.
you.
You know,
I'm going to watch your next show. So when you say, and we have this person on and we've had her or him on way more than anyone else.
yeah. Hey, I try to make everyone feel appreciated to some degree, you know.
Appreciate you, brother.
So yeah, today we're going to be covering like a somewhat serious and possibly even like a little bit depressing topic from one vantage point to another. And I figured, like, why not invite someone that's been in the holistic health and fitness industry for already like 20 plus years, and actually diving into like a lot more, like I don't know the right phrase to say it just off the top of my head here, because I kind of woke up and it was like 20 degrees today. I'm not the best at dealing with cold, but yeah, just dealing with self-sabotage and why people kind of don't create lasting resolution and lasting change with a lot of their health challenges or aesthetic challenges as well. And to kind of reinforce the point, I have some numbers here that I'm going to kind of quickly go over. And, today, I mean, with the advancements of medical science and literally the internet, all of the research done on nutrition, health, wellness, this and that, and, everything coming out, and there's a lot more, so much great information available today, but like America just keeps getting like sicker and sicker and more obese. And today we're going to dive into like why that's the case. And just to give you guys some numbers here. So there's a really good study on PubMed.gov titled Prevalence of Optimal Metabolic Health in American Adults. The study number is 30, 48, 47, 38. So you can go check it out for yourself. And in short, I mean, it showed that 9 out of 10 Americans these days are metabolically unhealthy. So 9 out of 10. So just right away, 90% right off the bat. And just looking at some other numbers here, I mean, the amount of Americans dying from heart attacks every year is 800,000 per year. From cancer is 650,000 per year. From type 2 diabetes, 105,000 per year. From strokes, 180,000 per year. From properly prescribed pharmaceutical drugs, 130,000 deaths every single year. And from alcohol, 100,000 deaths every single year. And just from those, there are a lot more things that we want to consider, but just from that brief synopsis of which are all basically for 99 or 90+% of those, deaths are basically the result of poor lifestyle and nutritional choices. We're getting about 2 million deaths every single year in the US alone. 2 million. So that's like a huge number. And there's no outcry, no crazy media coverage or any of that sort. And I'm just wondering, I'm going to kind of let you take over from here, Jator, but I'm just wondering, like, why, I see a lot of people, they get on like fitness programs, they take this pharmaceutical drug or that pharmaceutical drug, they go see this professional, that professional, this doctor, that doctor, and they still remain sick. They still remain full of obesity, full of disease, full of misery in the bulk majority of cases. And I was just wondering, like, what's your take? Like, why do so few people ever find their health in life, and their mental and physical health? Like, what's your take on that? I mean, you've been in this industry already for so long. You've seen it all,
Yeah, thank you for sharing those numbers, and also thank you for the preface of a depressing conversation. And I'll bring one of the most depressing guys on the planet, Jator Pierre, to talk about this. Perfect. Yeah, man. You know, it's such an interesting conundrum, and I think the facets are and variables are so numerous. So I'll do my best to kind of maybe tap into some that are often overlooked and maybe a little bit more hidden than the average Joe or Jane often kind of considers. So from my perspective, one of the reasons for that prevalence, and I would offer not only in the USA, I know USA is one of the kind of the worst as a theme in most industrialized countries. As far as I'm aware, those numbers are probably similar in nature. I live in Denmark. It's not nearly as similar in Denmark. But this speaks to the point that I'm getting to, which is habitual patterns. Many of us, inclusive of myself, at times are extremely unaware of how much of our lives are actually driven by familiarity, patterning, and said in maybe a more critical voice, walking around like a zombie, like habitually, not really aware, conscious of choice, words, actions, body position, and that loss of awareness, from my perspective, is probably the root driver to a lot of this. We have physical patterns, right? We can look at posture, we can look at physiology, we can look at hormones, we can look at neurotransmitters. All of those aspects have some level of homeostatic function that needs to be maintained. And that homeostatic function, interestingly enough, from my perspective, is not only driven by nature, i.e. our underlying genes, etc. It's also driven by nurture. So the environment in which we experience ourselves from the moment of conception all the way to this moment in our life all creates a tremendous amount of patterning that our physiology recapitulates to maintain a sense of control, to maintain a sense of familiarity, to maintain a sense of I know what's happening and I don't feel chaotic in a world that is very chaotic. So we have this physical patterning, you have emotional patterning, which also would be based off the same kind of construct. You have mental patterning, which would also be based off the same construct. And when you have so many aspects of your life driven through checked out self-hypnosis, it's extremely challenging to change that, because in one regard, it takes a tremendous amount of energy and self-awareness to notice when old patterns start to sneak in or sneak back in. Let's just say, as I've seen you have a gift, in my perspective, of helping people change the pattern that they experience their body in, their physical body. And of course, you're working with their nutrition and their mental and emotional state and lifestyle, etc. My perspective is you seem to have a gift that helps people hold on to that new pattern longer than most. You were quoting numbers earlier, and I'm going to kind of shoot off the hip on this number. So don't quote me on it, but I'm pretty sure it's pretty close. I think the number around people who were obese as youngsters in their childhood or teenage years and on, and then go on to a program to get into shape and create health and wellness for themselves. I believe the return rate to to obesity is somewhere in the neighborhood of 90% over time. Now, maybe in the short term, year long, 2 years, 3 years, no return or less return. But in the long term, there's usually a full return back to that familiar pattern. And, these patterns are insidious in our lives, and they're very challenging for most of us to pay attention to, because we have, as a theme, so many other things and challenges going on in our lives that when those other challenges start to show up, we then look to easy pathways that cost less energy perceptibly and that are old pathways, so they feel easier. We fall into that old trap. I'm doing air quotes now, trap. And then the cycle continues. So it's like, I thought about this before we got on, because it can almost seem like an out there concept. So I wanted to think of a way that may make more sense to someone as an experience. And the experience would be probably something like this. I'm 44 years old today. I've been on this planet for 44 years, and I've had the experience of gravity on this planet for 44 years, which also means that my perception, my brain, my proprioception is all designed to maintain and manage the reality that I've been used to for the last 44 years. If all of a sudden tomorrow gravity changed, I would be frightened as hell. Not only would I be frightened as hell, but for a very long time, I would still wake up with the old thought of gravity. Like if I could all of a sudden jump off buildings and fly, that would take me time to adjust to. And that adjustment period would be very scary. For the last 44 years, when I looked off a building, if I jumped off of that, I'd die. So maybe I start to get used to jumping off the building and flying or not dropping. But my physiology, my perception, my reaction when I step to the edge of the building would probably push me into a sympathetic state every time for a very long period of time, for many years, I would guess. The point I'm making is that these other aspects of our life are as often ingrained in us as something like the experience of gravity is. We expect it to be that way. And when it isn't that way, there are parts of us that become afraid and confused. And some people seem to have the capacity to make that leap, i.e., the Matrix and Neo, make that leap and start to master a new way of being. In my experience, that is a rarer bird, and that bird typically carries a very high desire to experience themselves in a different way at the cost of shedding and losing many other aspects of their life, inclusive of friends, family, food relationship, environment relationship, how they relate to themselves. All of those things, from my perspective, are required to get long-term change. And if I look at someone like yourself, or I look at my own experience of myself, I was obese as a kid. I now maintain probably in the neighborhood of 10 to 12% body fat throughout the year. And I'll be very open. There are times in my life, as we talked about before getting on here, there's a lot of change going on in my life right now. There are times in my life where I'm still find myself in a place of overwhelmed by experience, maybe. And what I notice in those places, Eugene, as right now, I notice that old patterns want to creep up. I can notice them though. So I'm back in the Bay Area. I notice right now at night, all of a sudden I'm having cravings, food cravings. All of a sudden I'm wanting to snack. All of a sudden I'm wanting to work out less. All of a sudden I'm wanting to move less. Now, for me, in that experience, because I pay attention to myself very closely, I can see that coming up and say, ooh, there's the old pattern that wants to come and soothe me or help me be familiar in this new environment in which I'm unfamiliar. And the only way personally I've managed to not fall into my own trap is to have that level of awareness and not zombie myself. When I say zombie myself, I could probably name 1,000 times in my life when you could have asked me the next day, what did you eat yesterday, Jator? Maybe when I was more in an obese state. And I would honestly say to you, I don't know what I ate. One of the reasons I would say I don't know what I ate is because I was completely checked out when I was eating it. I was just on habit mode, eating things. They were going into my face. Maybe I was chewing them, but there was no conscious awareness of choice. It was just reactive movement. And, to kind of tie this last piece is back to the beginning, is we are extremely reactive physiologically. We're extremely reactive emotionally. We're extremely reactive mentally. And to break those reactive patterns takes a tremendous amount of fortitude and compassion and a real deep desire to understand oneself, and to also understand that there are benefits and consequences to the way that we currently live. And there are going to be benefits and consequences to the new way that we want to live. And are we prepared as we can be to take ownership of the new way of being? Yep, there's going to be some benefit and there's going to be some consequence. Or are we also then taking ownership of, you know what? This isn't the right time for me to change this particular challenge. And I'm willing then to deal with the benefit and or consequence of staying exactly the same. So these change processes are a deep exploration of physical, emotional, mental, if you want to add in spiritual aspects of a human being, and the fortitude and energy to address that, I would just say is lacking isn't the correct word for me. It's low in most individuals. And I think it's as you know very well, you and I have chatted about this many times, and you probably know this more than I do from the work that you've done. As we continue to insert ourselves in these environments with food sourcing the way it is, home toxicity the way it is, environmental toxicity, relational and partnership toxicity, financial toxicity, the amount of energy that many people feel like they have on board for the change process is nil. And I don't know about you, but I know, it takes me some fortitude and energy to go to the gym. I love going to the gym. I love playing hockey. It's still a choice I have to, not that I have to make. It's a choice that I make because I know how supportive it is to how I want to experience myself. And I have experienced myself in an unhealthy way. And that experience is still motivating enough for me to pour my attention into myself to continue to do it differently today.
Well, do you feel like we can break this up into two different, like very, very long topics, but do you feel like a lot of the reason why even people that consciously, are making the effort to change, why they really don't find true resolution to change in any of their like mental or physical challenges is because of a couple of reasons, but two of the reasons is one, I just feel there's a tremendous amount of pressure from social programming in the American way of life, in the sense of putting your health, like mental and physical health, last in pursuit of like a career or any other kind of external accomplishments. And two, just the health system, I feel, is also just really addicted to symptom management strategies. And they just literally, for the most part, don't know how to do anything but manage symptoms. And I'm not saying the medical industry is just this way. I see it a lot in like the holistic circles also, and definitely in the fitness industry as well. Just like you mentioned and hinted at, if a person doesn't change the environment dramatically that led to all their issues, or more importantly, doesn't change the belief system that led them to feel like it's acceptable to be in that environment that led to all those issues, just true resolution of symptoms is going to be very rare. It's kind of like having, like a person finish a drug rehab program and then go back to the exact neighborhood and friends where all the drugs are, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, that person's going to, 99% of the chance they're going to just relapse and go back to being addicted to drugs, et cetera. But I feel it's also, let's kind of break this down. I mean, let's say a person wants to change, and let's just say, oh, they have like anxiety, which I had at one point in my life a lot. I had a tremendous amount of social anxiety. And at a younger age, I mean, I genuinely wanted to change. I wanted a complete resolution of that because I felt like the social anxiety was definitely lowering the quality of my life. I couldn't give, I had a hard time presenting information in college because you would get very nervous, hard time going on dates, socializing, et cetera, et cetera. So obviously, not knowing any better, I went, to the family physician, and I'm like, well, I have this issue. And they're like, well, just take this anti-anxiety medication and you'll be okay, I didn't even know anything about it back then, but just like something rubbed me the wrong way of approaching, my anxiety challenge through that method. So I did the harder path, and it took many, many years, and it was hard and at times even more anxiety provoking, like taking improv classes, taking acting classes, just forcing myself to go on dates, changing my diet a tremendous amount. Being like smarter with how I work out, in the sense of not working out too much to overexert my central nervous system and make me even more anxious, et cetera, et cetera. But I just feel like just a lot of the health services, I don't know why, but they just don't want to tell the person like, look, man, you need to change like pretty much every aspect of your life. You need to change like who you are, because no matter what you do, outside of that, it's like, dude, the chances of you actually seeing a resolution to whatever you're struggling with is like close to zero. I don't know the exact number, but it's so low. It's like almost not even worth trying,
Agreed.
I mean, it's sad. It's just sad to see that, because I see like, man, I don't even know where to start with this one, because I also ran into these challenges myself while seeking out some health challenges with anxiety. Then I had a back injury in 2015, and luckily I ran into the right people, but it took a lot of work. And literally 99% of the practitioners were like a complete waste of time. And I felt like more lost with their health than I was in one way or another. So I don't know. I'll let you take over, man. But I don't know what your thoughts on that is, because I'm pretty sure you've been to the circus many times over. You've seen the clowns,
Yes, I appreciate you, Eugene. So let me see if I can capture a few of those points, and we can go from there. So one piece of it kind of goes back to this familiarity thing for me, right? So I've been in Denmark now for the last 4 years, and culturally in Denmark, I think while I've been there, I think I've probably seen less than a handful of obese people in my 4 years there. Now, the interesting thing about that is, of course, we can make beautiful stories around movement and food, and all those things would probably be true, lifestyle, etc. They have a very different lifestyle. But also what's interesting is that from a kind of a cultural perspective, when you're obese in Denmark, you stand out. So in an interesting way, you're not actually fitting in with the rest of the tribe. And that, from a psychological perspective, back to your point, is here in the States, it's the opposite. I think we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 65% obesity rate, and it might be higher than that now here in the States. And so we're seeing a shift to what's become common in the United States is metabolic ill health, obesity, chronic fatigue, unwell, overwork, quick food, and the physical body has also now become common to be overweight or obese or morbidly obese, and that's becoming a commonality. And an interesting thing about us as human beings is, at a subconscious level, we often want to fit into the norm. It's the rarer bird as a theme who doesn't want to fit into the norm. Most people want to fit into structures, inclusive of the rare bird that wants to fit into the rare bird structure. So that is definitely part of the driver. Our culture, our cultural upbringing here, our most people, as I've experienced in the States, are taught to be driven for production, not taught to be driven for experience of who they are or celebrated for who they are. A difference in Denmark, as I've experienced it, is they have a word there that's called the yendelone, which, excuse me to any Danes that listen to this, and I don't get this exactly right. But that essentially means to be homogenized, to keep yourself small, to not stand out, to be like everyone else. And if everyone else in that culture is about family first, work second, is about riding a bike first, car second, is about going to the gym first, sitting at home second, is about honoring your physical body first, not honoring your physical body last. Organic and biodynamic and Steiner schools are normal there. Yes, they have convention, but the convention isn't undershined compared to the organic, biodynamic, and Steiner. They're both at very similar levels in terms of the inundation within society. So we have that cultural influence, which is huge. And then, as we've all noticed, well, maybe we haven't all noticed, over the past 2 years with something like the COVID situation, because of the way that we've been programmed from a medical perspective of always, addressing symptoms, one, as a theme from conventional medicine, and two, because many of us are programmed to look at medical doctors as essentially gods, and that they know it all and know what's going on, to outsource our trust. When someone else says anything contrary to that perspective, i.e., change of environment, food can save your life and be your medicine, the microbiome has a huge influence on calorie uptake and nutrient absorption, movement and nature are important. Connection with yourself and stress management are important. When you start speaking that type of language in an environment in which that language has never been spoken broadly, you sound like a crazy person. And
people that like live and exist in a sea of mental and physical pathology, of course,
exactly.
Like,
so,
look, Jator, listen, I'm going to interrupt you for a split second.
Please do.
I do want you to continue. Like, listen, I listed easy to understand stats in the beginning. These numbers are obvious and can be found like freaking anywhere. Okay. 2 million people die every single year just in the US alone from basically from poor lifestyle and nutritional choices. They killed themselves. Okay. And shit, I wanted to go somewhere with that, but now I freaking spaced out. But we'll remember in a second. So please continue.
Perfect. You'll remember it. I'll remember it too.
Yes.
To your point, let's just say someone is eating, let's just say my diet or your diet, right? And I'm just going to assume that's essentially meat, starch, and some vegetables that we can handle. Okay, so that's my basic intake. Now, the interesting thing is that most people in the conventional world will hear that as a nutritional intake or what I normally eat on a daily basis and say, wow, that's so radical. That's so extreme. That's so different. And what I would say is I would flip that on its head and say, actually, my diet is what human beings have been eating for thousands and thousands of years. And we could make a pretty strong case that your box cereals, your Oreo cookies, your microwave food, that's actually the radically different diet. And that radically different diet is directly affecting people's physiology, which directly is also affecting their mental and emotional state, which directly affects their ability to think, perceive, and understand, which also leads them to a place of being in a kind of consistent, reactive, sympathetic state. And the more consistently sympathetic and reactive you are, the more myopic your lens has to be out of a place of survival. The more that you are in a place of survival, the less you can see because you have to focus on what's directly in front of you. Your imagination basically goes to shit because when you're in flight or flight, not only in an acute situation, but also chronically, your physiology or your body is making decisions for your survival, which would be based on your most familiar patterns, which will then you will see somebody like Eugene or myself healthy with a smile and feeling good. And we will look like absolute freaks because we are no longer the common. Now, Eugene and I, from my perspective, actually represent what is normal. And everything else outside of that is what's representative of what is now considered normal, but it's not actually normal. It's common. And when we start to see even more something like IG or Facebook, where you see, oh my God, someone isn't obese online and that person gets thousands of likes, that's demonstrating the issue because that should be the norm. Healthy bodies should be the norm, but because of how we are treating ourselves culturally, which then influences our choices, our food choices, our environmental choices, our partner choices, and then we dwindle that down into our family of origin and what the values were there and how we were raised within that environment. And it takes a tremendous amount of fortitude to break out of those cages, the family of origin cages, the family of culture cages, and to join or to consider joining the family of, I'm going to become my own individual. I'm going to explore my values and write my own way of living. I'm going to evaluate the values that I was programmed with and do a deep scrub on which one of those values do I want to maintain and which one of those values would I like to dissolve, to do differently. And as you know, Eugene, and as I know, that takes carving out time in your schedule to pay attention to yourself and really make these decisions from a very different place. And when we talk about our medical system, when you're a doctor, and I know doctors, and they're often sharp people, when you're a doctor and you've spent upwards of 300,000 on your education, it is going to be vastly challenging to your ego if you start to learn that what you learned in school isn't that helpful to creating true health and wellness in the world. Because you'll have to admit at some level that you are playing a game of treating symptoms, not getting to root cause. Maybe you're actually pushing people into more ill health by the school of thought that you've gone to. And that, for many people, it's hard to even leave the house in which they live. Can you imagine being so subscribed to a philosophy with a tremendous amount of money put into it and say, damn, I need to start all over? And so that perpetuates the cycle all the way up to research, to doctors, to government, and downstream to people like us. And there will always be, in my experience, outliers who decide, something is amiss here. I don't know what that is. And for me, my perspective and finding what was amiss was I went down the conventional route. I remember thinking when I was a kid, my stepmom was into organic food. I thought she was a fucking quack. What are you talking about, organic food? And what are you talking about, supplements? And no government would do this to us. And they, of course, they care about our health and wellness. We're their people. And
yeah, just like a stripper cares about you too. Strip club.
Yeah. It was devastating, man. And to learn that and to find a place of courage out of that is rarer than it is to find fear and shame out of that and dive deeper into that hole.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning into the podcast. I'm curious, have you ever been confused by the labels in the grocery store? In Yevgeny's book, he demystifies the difference between caged, cage-free, free-range, and pasture-raised meats. He also covers how to avoid GMOs, source high-quality water, fish, supplements, and other related topics. It's a beautifully illustrated, non-technical read that comes with a comprehensive video series and other extended learning materials. Jump on Amazon and check out the book titled Anti-Factory Farm Shopping Guide by Eugene Trufkin. Now let's dive back into the podcast.
Yeah, and for the listeners, I mean, this gets back to my thought that I kind of spaced out on. Look, what Jator is saying here is important. It's important and it applies to literally like almost every single American. We're just focusing on America here. And regardless of those stats that I listed in the beginning, which are, once again, completely available to literally anyone, look, step outside literally anywhere in America these days. And 9 out of 10 people you run into are full of obesity and disease, like full of mental and physical pain, clinical levels of mental and physical pain, not just like little annoyances. Results speak for themselves. If the system, especially if the medical system was enough, you know, that symptom management system, which America has been addicted to for 50 plus years now, if that was enough and that's all that needed to be done, how come America is the sickest it's ever been? America has never been this sick ever before. I'd even argue that the Homo sapien has never been this sick as America is today in its 200,000 years of existence. And if you take into consideration all the other 28 human species that have come and gone through evolution, it's the sickest human species that it's ever been, period, ever. So, and I do feel like you kind of also mentioned, I do feel like people are easily addicted to the medical model and solution because it reinforces the philosophy of not really wanting to change, and the fear of actually making that change, because it's not easy and it's not hard. But I always say, like, dude, is it easy to live being obese your whole life, or being, having this health issue or that health issue, and then you solve this and another thing comes up, and your whole life is just chasing one symptom after another, and that's not easy either. You know what I mean? So it's not like your trade-off is great, And I do feel like the reason people like subscribe and also oftentimes defend, like they think we're like the quacks, although like freaking climbing mountains, super healthy, et cetera, staying also at a reasonable body fat percentage all year round, stuff of that sort. And kind of we're the weirdos for some reason all of a sudden. Okay, so that's a whole nother podcast in and of itself. But I just feel like they subscribe and defend this model because the medical model also just reinforces, like, oh, it's okay, you don't have to stop being the dummy that led you to all these problems. You can continue being that person. Here's some medication to numb your pain away, so you can continue being that person for a few more years until that, they call it medicine, but really it's a drug. And it's in oftentimes high concentrations just to actually have a clinical statistical effect on your health that, 2 or 3 years later, all of a sudden you have some side effects from the drugs. And all of a sudden you need 3 other drugs to counter those side effects. And then a few years later, you need a couple of other drugs to counter the side effects of those side effects, et cetera, et cetera. And like I always say on a lot of my podcasts, and I use your quote that I got from HLC1, still my favorite class at the Czech Institute, by the way.
Yes.
Yeah, because of the awesome instructor. But yeah, instead of, taking a rock out of your shoe to reduce the pain, which a little child understands, educated adults, they just take painkillers and continue to walk with that rock inside their shoe. So I don't know, man. It's kind of, you've been doing this for so long. I mean, do you ever like feel sad with how lost a lot of people are, even the ones that have the conscious intention of wanting to change, because they just see these systems as authorities, like, oh, this obese doctor that can't even solve their own health problems all of a sudden is going to have an answer for mine. And most medical doctors are even sicker than the people they're trying to treat. I mean, I've trained who knows how many
MDs,
doctors or students in residency currently are working like 8-hour weeks. And they're telling their clients not to work these hours. I'm like, dude, set the motherfucking example. Like, when is this idiocy gonna fucking stop, dude? Like, how are you getting intelligent people to be so dumb at the same time?
Yeah.
What's your take on that, Jator? I just feel like fucking sad for some people, man.
I appreciate it, brother. I appreciate my experience of your passion. And one thing I want to say before I speak to my own sadness is, I 100% agree with you in terms of that, the medical model. My perspective is in some regard, our medical model is taking away the responsibility from people to learn how to be healthy and well on their own. If we can always fix them, it's an interesting, and I'm doing air quotes there with fix them. It's an interesting place of like, when are we helping or when are we enabling? And I think it's a really fine line. And I think that our medical model as a theme enables people to continue to live the lives that's causing their pain and simply numbs it out. Because our medical model also are the people who distribute that model are not trained significantly in behavior change and addressing that, nor, as you just said, if they're working 80 hours a week, they're as overworked, malnourished, obese, sick as the people that are coming to see them are. So it's pill poppers offering pills to other pill poppers to proliferate this way of living. Another piece that I think is really important for people to hear that I don't hear often shared is that medical drugs, thank you for not calling it medicine. I almost would say in some regard, it's a discount of that word. Medical drugs, they actually don't have side effects. They simply have unintended effects because we don't understand fully the interactions that are happening to all of the proteins. Because when you direct something at a singular protein, the body is very repetitive in nature. So you're going to be affecting many other aspects that play a role or are downstream from that same protein mechanism. So it's really important for people to understand that these are not side effects. That's almost excusable. These are simply unintended effects. And that's important for people to know. You mentioned something about death from medical drugs, and that is like properly prescribed. There is also iatrogenic effects, which is ill-prescribed medical drugs and procedures, which is also extremely underreported. The research that I've seen says that the underreporting of that could be up to 90% underreported. So our deaths per year, iatrogenic deaths could be number one amongst all deaths, which would be medical, essentially, malpractice. So that's just important to know the system in which you're putting yourself and the trust, the trust that you're having in a system that, well, from my perspective, does not have your best health and wellness at heart. Not to say that the doctors don't. My experience is that they're trained in a certain system. And as I know, it takes a very peculiar person to break out of systems that they've paid for. So I wanted to say those couple of things. And then in terms of sadness, yeah, man, I definitely feel a sense of sadness. I feel a sense of overwhelm. I feel a sense of confusion over the last 2 years with this COVID situation, which I think has really brought to the forefront the amount of discord, disharmony, conflict, inability for nuanced conversation, lack of emotional literacy and understanding, a lack of managing our reactive nature, willingness to deep dive and understand that science itself is a system of asking questions, and those questions are poignant to science to always be able to ask questions and to explore and to challenge. And in our society right now, as I experience it, challenge and opinion and exploration are being disregarded as disharmonious and something that we should not do anymore. So yes, am I sad? Sad in part, yes. I think the larger feeling for many aspects of me is afraid. Where the hell are we going? And what is coming next? And am I a cup half full person or a cup, half empty person? I oscillate between those two at different times. In this regard, I will honestly say I don't know what's next, and I'm not bought into my perspective of a lot of my friends that I respect, that this is this grand awakening. I think maybe that might be true, but grand awakenings, in my perspective and my thought process, don't happen over a year or two. They might happen over 70 years. There is going to be a grand, excuse my English, fucking shit show over the next 70 years. And I will be surprised if we come out the other end of this with a healthier human being population and a healthier planet. I will be surprised.
Yeah, to touch on what you mentioned, I mean, this whole entire COVID thing just really brought into the spotlight quickly, like America's, well, the world's now dependence on symptom management strategies for health, I mean, first and foremost, I'm not anti-medical drugs. Everything has a place in time. I'm just anti-using those drugs as a symptom management strategy for poor lifestyle and nutritional choices, especially when it's like a first go-to strategy without even wanting to even hint at the change. It's like, dude, okay, like you got the vaccine, cool. But is that going to stop you from having a heart attack? No. Okay. Is that going to stop you from having cancer? No. How about diabetes, stroke, or living a miserable lifestyle full of obesity and disease? No, it's not. So when you get it, like, don't be like a dumbass. And then the next day I see you taking a picture at like a fast food place, bragging about that you got your like third dose of being dumb, third dose of being dumb, basically, in my opinion. Okay. It's like, dude, like you're going to die anyways, man. Do you not realize that? Like you have a 60% chance of developing cancer in your lifetime now if you're in the US, and half of those people that develop it die from it. And you're worried about like a 0.001% chance of having complications from COVID that require hospitalization, which don't mean you're actually going to die from it. So you're worried about that, but you're not worried about having a 60% chance of developing cancer and dying from that. Or you're not worried about the 33% chance of dying from a heart attack. Or you're not worried about the 100% chance of living a lower quality life because you're walking around obese all the time. No, that's not the worry. Okay. The real worry is COVID. Okay. Well, then you deserve your misery if you're going to continue to be that stupid in your life. Okay.
I love you, Eugene.
Yeah, man. It's just kind of like, at the same time, I feel sad, but also like pissed off that like fucking people are so dumb. And unfortunately, they're allowed to have kids too. And then look, a lot of times people say, well, that's a virus, is dangerous. But you know what the most dangerous virus of all is? A belief system, because that spreads just like a virus from person to person. And a belief system that doesn't put yourself and your mental and physical health first to spread from person to person. That's how we developed in that, that study that I quoted in the beginning. 9 out of 10 Americans are metabolically unhealthy now. And the sad part is if you talk to them and question them, the majority of them will say they're completely healthy. Like they'll look you dead in the eye and say they're fine. That's when mental and physical pathology has been completely normalized in this culture. It's completely normal. And I used to give corporate health lectures like you. And a lot of times, people grossly underestimate how overweight they are. Like there would be a person that's obese that say they're just slightly overweight. Like I'm 15% body fat, for example, right now. And if you look at my physique, it's still like very lean and muscular, but that's already 5% away from being overweight. And how many people are like that lean? I'm not saying I'm like shredded or bragging about it or anything, because I'm not. But how many people are even close to as lean as I am these days? It's like rare to see that, And so it's been like completely normalized. And then like you have parents that have completely normalized it for themselves, and they pass this virus, this belief system, I call it a virus, to their kids. Even their pets are full of disease and obesity as well. And they pass this along, and then that virus ends up killing the host. You die from a heart attack if you haven't checked. You die from cancer. You could die from diabetes, et cetera, et cetera. So it's as dangerous as a virus. And I would say, like, could easily prove that belief systems have killed far more people throughout human history than any virus, including the Black Plague. Okay.
Well said.
So,
Agree.
Uh,
and I think that's in part where my work or your work and many others' work comes into play. Is one of my favorite quotes is, no matter how loud you scream from a place of knowledge, no one will hear you. No matter how silent you are from a place of wisdom, everyone does. Of course, there's nuance to that quote. And what I do my best to do is to be a model of physical health, mental health, emotional health, and to model that in my interactions, to model that in my courses, in my classes, to model that around my clients, and to quite frankly model that for myself. And I think where I find some compassion for where we are at currently is remembering, for me, I've been there. I've been obese, and I was unaware of my obesity. And I remember I must have been 13 years old. My pops just got remarried, and there was a picture from the wedding. It was our faces side to side, very kind of a close-up picture. And I can still feel it right now. I remember seeing that picture of myself, and I was in shock. It was almost like the first time I was actually seeing me, my physical body, the way it was. And a part of that, which was shocking, was that realization. Holy shit, I'm obese. And I didn't have that perspective because I've always been, for many reasons, but I've been very athletic. I've been lucky with the ladies since I was a youngster. I didn't carry this self picture of obesity and what that might have represented to me, or it was so painful I completely numbed it out. And also normalized it, as you spoke to, because interestingly enough, many of the men in my family are typically obese when they're younger. And maybe I was following that norm from a psychological level, and in creating that environment for myself to follow that norm, so it didn't feel abnormal or out of sorts. So that place is where I get to kind of find this middle ground of, yes, I'm sad, I'm frustrated, I'm overwhelmed in parts and scared. And then it's okay, well, what can I do about that? Well, I can coach, I can work with lots of clients, I can start a company, I can do this on a larger scale to help more people learn to really support themselves so that they can become models for others. And quite frankly, I don't know what other chance we got to change this, other than for you and I eventually to go and make our own commune and make our own society and community where that's all part of it. Farming and movement and food and nutrition and connection and community, and I'm not fantasizing that from the perspective of, oh, I think that's going to be super easy and not uncomfortable. And I was just saying to a friend of mine that You throw me out in the wild. I'm not you, Eugene. You throw me out in the wild, I'll probably die in a day or two because I'm like,
But you got to hang out with me at least with that.
Exactly. I don't know how to start a fire.
Away,
I don't know how to hunt. I'll be eating grass and some flowers, and I'll be dead in 2 days.
I'm like, listen, man, you can't be a vegan out here anymore, Jator. You can't just live off grass. You look like that one guy from Lord of the Rings. I forgot his name in like 2 days.
Yeah,
a little
Gollum or whatever.
Gollum? I forgot his name already. But anyway,
so.
that guy. That's the vegan out in the wild. It's like just 2 strands of hair left. Looks like he just went through like 10 rounds of chemo.
Oh shit. So yeah, man, it's I think the challenges that we have in front of us are large, and I hope that we can affect change, and I don't think change comes from Instagram or Facebook. I think it starts way more grassroots than that, and to just criticize those platforms a bit, which I'm also a part of. I don't know that those platforms actually do anything but cause more chaos and more issue and more discord, no matter what you're sharing, inclusive of what I share. And yeah, we'll see what happens, brother.
Yeah, I feel where I want to get to. I forgot. Kind of was listening to you, and totally forgot my train of thought here. I was wondering. Oh yeah, you mentioned about creating your own commune, and as I told you, like as you know already, I kind of was raised, in the beginning with my grandmother and off. Like a biodynamic farm, basically in Ukraine, and then I moved here and lived basically like a normal life in like Irvine, California, around that area. And then I'm leaning more towards kind of going to semi-off-grid living, and what I mean by that is basically like you're still somewhat connected to the city, but you're like 2 hours away. You have like a plot of land in like some heavily wooded area. And you live there, but if you do want to go to the city, it's always like an hour or 2 drive away if you really want to. But I feel like sometimes I thought about, hey, maybe I could go off grid again. It has a tremendous amount of pluses, but then I feel like in terms of like you mentioned changing society, I feel society as it is now, it's like a cancer. It's like a tumor, And if you look at, go to Google Maps and zoom out enough, you look at any kind of city area, it looks like plaque, like growing on an apple, Like, when you leave an apple out too long, it's like this kind of mold growing on it. And that's like what like society is, and it keeps spreading. And eventually it'll get to you, no matter where you are. So I don't know, like there could be some temporary escape. But I just think like the way it's going now, it's like it just keeps spreading like a cancer and a virus, and just like the human race is like the most invasive species anywhere. Like literally anywhere they go, everything dies. It's even they kill themselves, obviously.
Agreed. And I think that speaks to then where we started with this, why so many of us self-sabotage is often because we see so many others self-sabotaging, and that becomes the normal behavior. That becomes what's expected. Many of us carry, this is going to be very cliche, at least for me it will be, many of us carry one of our deepest fears is that we shine extremely bright. That fear often keeps us in a place of self-sabotage so that we don't outshine others. And in a very interesting way, we don't outshine ourselves, and maybe even in a more interesting way, we don't outshine our parents. We stay in our place. We stay where we believe we should stay, where we deserve to stay. how we deserve to live, how we deserve to experience life, how we deserve to age and feel in our body. These are all also, from my perspective, patterns that are programmed into us at a very young age, and that we subconsciously proliferate throughout our lives and wonder why we do it. And there's an old saying, actually, I don't know that it's old. I'll say it's old because it makes it sound more legit, that you know your future, all you need to do is look to your past. That is an implication of the cycles that most of us live life through. They're repetitive because they're familiar, because we feel a sense of control, because it's what we know, because the unfamiliar is much more scary. The unfamiliar of how bright you actually shine is much scarier than the familiar pattern of how you experience yourself already. The brightness would represent some level of unpredictability, and that's often the last thing that any of us want to do, at least from an ego standpoint. And so we play out these behaviors in a cyclical pattern. And back to kind of where we started, it takes some level of conscious intervention to notice the pattern, to intervene, and to start to change that pattern, and have some kind of a support system as you're going through that change process that might help you navigate the emotional terrain that you'll go through, or the mental terrain that you'll go through, or even the physical terrain and change that you'll go through. I know there was a time when I was obese and I started to lose body fat, and I got, really lean. I got down to 4.3% body fat on my way to that very unhealthy body fat. I remember being afraid of who I saw in the mirror, as in, I didn't even recognize who that was. Am I even me anymore? Which is implicative of how attached I was to all the things that it meant to be who I used to be. And those threads and those tethers are not light. They are thick and heavy and are deeply attached within us. And I think in another regard to some of your points is that I think and experience that, these change processes, we do need support. And what that support could look like is community. We do need other people around us who have similar values, so that we can feel a kind of a super bounce with each other, rather than what many of us experience is like everyone else is doing it in an opposite direction, and not many people have that fortitude to be strong in that. No, you know what, this is the new way that I'm going to go, irregardless of where everyone else is going.
Yeah, dude, I just say, with that, having said that, I'm like, dude, okay, you want to go down the proven route? Okay, go down the proven route. This is what awaits, a bunch of obesity, misery, and disease. It's
Yeah.
proven to happen. So go ahead, do it, good luck. Yeah. If you want predictability and similarity, there you go. You got to be miserable for your whole life. Okay. There's also a saying that you mentioned, I forgot who it was, but maybe a famous psychologist I read in one of Walensky's books, which is an author you got me into a while back. Really love that guy's work. Really hate that it's literally impossible to find him anywhere. He's like anti having an email. I'm like, okay, well, at least have an email, man, so I can email you something. Okay, but he mentioned, we must, this is kind of paraphrasing, I don't know exactly how the quote goes, but we must crush other people's dreams, such as like our dreams were crushed, in the sense of like, when you feel like jealousy towards others for shining and being happy in themselves, you tend to kind of like try to bring them down. It's obvious in social media, you see a lot of people that are like, hey, just being themselves, and happy with it. You might not agree with that, but you have to like go out of your way to put that person down or something of that sort, So, yeah. Well, I think we touched on a bunch of great points. I'm trying to kind of look through my notes here and see what else we can kind of touch on. Do you want to cover any other interesting topics that you've been running into, or any other points you want to bring up? I'll be happy to kind of go into it with you.
Let's see. I think what I've just found interesting is, in general, what we've been talking about is that it's challenging to change, and there's lots of maybe steps that one might need to take, and that the road won't be easy. It won't be light. It may require some heavy lifting. And I think maybe from a practical standpoint, to anyone that's going down that path, to find someone or a group or something that can support you in that process. I think that's at least to the point to where you can actually then learn to support yourself and take back your own power. I would also just invite people to take time with things, back to this idea of around familiar patterns. What I notice often in my clients, and I'm at home right now at my parents' place, and watching them navigate life and having conversations with them. There's not a lot of time that's given to, if you read something, to like really let yourself marinate in that, to explore opposite perspectives, to challenge yourself to be open and get outside of your own box, to get curious about how you've lived life to this point, and ask yourself, do you want to live differently? Do you want to have a different experience? If you were 44 like I am today, and you were going to look forward to the next 44 years, do you want to do the same thing, or do you want to challenge yourself and experience things in a different way? And, in hindsight, when I moved to Denmark 4 years ago, that was one of the motivations, was to go to a place where everything was unfamiliar. The money, the trains, the signs, the language, the culture, the people. In essence, I felt like a 3-year-old when I first got to Denmark. No understanding of how to navigate that place on my own. And that has been super supportive to my own change process while I've been there, maybe more in a emotional or psychological way than a physical way. But to stretch yourself and stretch yourself metaphorically every day, to approach life at a different angle, have fun, play, get curious, try different foods, try different ways of living, try having different conversations. I know that's a lot of my own value set projected onto all of you. And I'd ask you all to just get curious about that, and go find out what's out there, rather than thinking what's out there. For me, it's very different.
Cool. Well, to close it off, I know you kind of already answered it, and I answered it too, but if you had a percentage point, I know it's not even realistic to give a percentage point for this, but if, let's say a person is struggling with some kind of health issue, ABC, okay, what are their chances of actually having a complete resolution of that health issue without changing their belief system or environment? If you had to give it a percentage.
Percentage?
Yeah.
I would say maybe just scraping above 0.
Yeah, I would too. Maybe a decimal point. That's because I'm being optimistic and positive.
Yes, that's my optimism.
Okay, so I hope you guys, I know a lot of the listeners listening to this are going to listen to it and go okay, I'm going to try keto, and that's going to solve all my problems. Okay, good luck to you then, man. You can't save everyone, but for the ones that really listen to this message, I hope you took away the importance of, look, you got to get away from symptom management strategies of healthcare. I know they're oftentimes alluring and the simplicity of them is kind of tempting, but from my observation, it might provide some short-term relief at best, but you will never, ever find a complete resolution to any of your health challenges, especially if those health challenges are once again a byproduct and result of poor lifestyle and nutritional choices, which once again is a result of a belief system, a virus that doesn't facilitate health conscious choices in life. Okay. So hope you guys took that away from it. And
I think to maybe a last number that I'd like to share too. You've said this multiple times, and I think based on current well done research, somewhere in the neighborhood of 85 to 90% of all chronic disease is attributed to lifestyle and environment. That means you do have the power to create change in your life.
Yeah, and I think one of the best things like a good health provider can do is just get the patient to stop hurting themselves. Mm-hmm. So you're doing it to yourself, guys. You're doing it to yourself, which sounds depressing on the surface, but it's not. Because if you're doing it to yourself, you can stop doing it to yourself. And that gives you all the power. So I don't know how it can be more positive than that. That gives you all the power. And so thanks, Jator, for being a guest on the show. I'm pretty sure we'll kind of do a few more episodes later on, stuff of that sort. But it was great to catch up with you. I know I'm not seeing you. This is an audio, but it's kind of see your name, Jator Pierre, on my screen. So.
It's always an honor, brother. You're definitely a shining light out there. You're inspiring to me, someone I appreciate very much on the planet. I'm always honored to call you a friend, to call you a brother, to be on anything that you're doing. And thank you for being you, brother.
Gotcha. Thanks, Jator. All right, guys, have a good one. Have a good one, everyone.
Thanks for tuning into the podcast. If you've ever had trouble losing weight, or you've lost weight, but still didn't have the ideal body or health you're aiming for, please feel free to reach out anytime and book an assessment. Eugene will work with you to cover your goals in detail, see what's holding you back, and go from there. In the meantime, feel free to check out the countless testimonials on Eugene's website in the link below. In the testimonial section, you'll notice everyone has various backgrounds, are of all different ages, and all have had different challenges in their life, but they all have one thing in common: they were all able to find their health and achieve their ideal body. You're also welcome to add yourself to the Facebook group in the link below. There you'll have access to the live videos that Eugene does weekly on Sundays, and other helpful content. Thank you again for tuning in.